When I was in Dallas, I tried to stop a cyber terror attack, but because I had already been identified in the pension portfolio as being an asset due to a alleged medical disability, that was actually insurance fraud. When they stole my retirement benefits from a civil service job I had in another area that also happened to be connected to derivatives associated with acquisition of government vehicles. They prevented me from being able to stop that cyber terror attack, and it's continued. So, you don't really want me to contact the police directly. What you want me to do is something that's going to complement the insurance scheme in the next room so that they get their pension diversion. So, I'm going to give it to you straight from the other side of this pipeline. Los Angeles Times, October 17th, 2018. These are grim days in Moscow. Sanctions imposed by the Trump administration continue to tighten the vice on the Russian economy. Foreign capital is fleeing the country, increasing its economic isolation. But there remains a major source of funding upon which the Kremlin can still reliably depend: California state workers and retirees. Retirement savings of nearly 2 million current and former California firefighters, police officers, and state employees are hard at work. In Moscow, as of the end of June, the California Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS, held $460 million in Russian government bonds, according to data provided to Bloomberg News. Since purchases of Russian government bonds are effectively loans to Vladimir Putin's government, this means CalPERS has extended nearly $500 million to a regime that sought to hack our election system in 2016 and is still attempting to undermine American democracy and the US-led Western alliance. Now I'm going to do that thing where when somebody's communicating important information that could stop crime to you, you have to ping it off of somebody that's been labeled as some sort of liability or troubled asset so you can effectively divert it to the account you want. And this is what I'm going to let you know. I've already put this publicly, so those who hacked my life and spied on me and stole my life and my work products and repurposed it already have what they need to do this for whoever it is they've reassigned it to. See, this isn't just about California retirees. It's also about Texas retirees, thanks to the Texas Impact Drivers Program, which requires all new drivers to use their personal birth certificate, which may be from another state, by the way, in order to get a certificate that they took an online training so that they could then qualify to obtain their driver's license. And the program they implemented was started in California by the California Educators Association, California Casualty Insurance, and the California Highway Patrol. So it's not just the California pensioners, right? By virtue of the diversions and all of these sorts of acts of laundering between the California retirement system and the Texas retirement system, using minors, because Texas never implemented the adult drivers program. They just kept the youth drivers and the teen drivers. So if you're an adult, you get lumped in with the kids. Now I'll continue, and wherever you've diverted it to so that the police can get their kickback can continue as well. If that isn't bad enough, there's also reason to believe it's a risky investment. Relations between the two countries could very well get worse if U.S. sanctions against Russia are extended to debt, as two bills before the Senate propose. The bonds would lose significant value and CalPERS would see a steep loss. It would be one thing if CalPERS were trying to unwind its position in Russian government debt. Foreign investors have unloaded about $7 billion worth of Russian sovereign bonds since April because of the threat of sanctions and mounting tensions between the United States and Russia. Not CalPERS. The California pension giant has increased its holdings in Russian debt by 8% since last year, Bloomberg reported. It's easy to see why ruble-denominated bonds are so attractive to the money managers of California's giant pension. These bonds, known as OFZs, yield 7% or more, a rarity in today's low-yield environment. Just so you know, when I got traffic to Dallas, the bonds were up to 8.25%. But there's a good reason why many investors steer clear of Russian debt. It turns out that some of the dollars loaned to the Russian treasury are used to recapitalize the heavily sanctioned banking sector, or they wind up through an opaque process back in the accounts of sanctioned Russian companies, which, by the way, are probably connected to brokers that have licenses in the United States that were pulled by Treasury, so somebody else can use the licenses for sanctioned brokers connected with Russia to run all of these other sidecar deals where they're laundering money for local kickbacks. In 2016, the Obama administration tried to warn U.S. banks not to take part in a potentially lucrative Russian bond deal because it would undermine sanctions, according to the Wall Street Journal. Also, Russian government bonds figured in a $234 billion money laundering scandal at Danske Bank. It's also the year before a 25-year bond deal that was hooked up between the United States and Russia came due that needed to be leveraged through Exxon and Citigroup. The bottom line is that CalPERS either doesn't know or doesn't care what the Kremlin does with California retirees' money. That's not true. He's in the other room right now trying to figure that out. Critics are quick to point out that CalPERS's holdings of Russian debt are a minute fraction of the $326 billion pension fund's investment. But those holdings matter very much to Moscow, where the size of California's stake in Russian debt generated a flurry of news coverage last week. Quote, surprisingly, the state of California has entered the top 10 of foreign holders of Russian debt obligations, end quote, the Moscow-based website Pravda.ru noted. Topping the list was BlackRock Inc., the giant New York money manager that advises CalPERS with $2.5 billion worth of Russian debt. If I'm correct, BlackRock Inc. also had a prospectus from 2015 saying that for the next 5 years, of the major 5 areas regarding global finance, the situation in dealing with Russian investments was going to be one of the top 5 considerations for global finance. Not only that, if I'm correct, they're currently right now contracted with the Federal Reserve and the Department of Treasury to deal with junk bonds connected to all of these failed businesses that we personally are supposed to launder for what, those payoffs to all those guys that sat on what happened during the S&L crisis so that the girls that they trafficked when we were children can now be the retirement bonus? Okay. There's more at risk than just the reputation of the state's pension giant. The 2 bills pending before the Senate, including one that South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham calls the Sanctions Bill from Hell, would bar purchases of new issues of Russian sovereign debt in the United States. Enacting the so-called nuclear option could make all Russian debt radioactive to investors. Bond prices would plummet, leaving CalPERS with a large loss. Just so you know, I always think it's very irresponsible when journalists just willy-nilly use words like nuclear option and radioactive when it comes to finance, especially when what they're actually not talking about is that somebody refused to prosecute charges that a former Secretary of State and former senator who was on the committee regarding pensions in this country was brokering all of these completely fraudulent deals connected to the actual uranium trade. By contrast, CalSTRS, the giant state teachers retirement fund, appears to be far more leery about lending money to the Kremlin. It holds about $9.5 million in Russian bonds. To some, any amount lent by a U.S. public pension fund to the Kremlin is too much. I can think of no credible reason why U.S. public pension funds and savings vehicles should fund a government that is actively violating our sovereignty. Dalip Singh, a former U.S. Treasury official who helped draft sanctions on Russia, said last month in testimony before the Senate Banking Committee. State and local employees need not sit idle by why their money goes to work in Russia. They have a say in how the retirement savings they earned over decades of public service are invested. CalPERS generally resist divestment, although both it and CalSTRS divested years ago from tobacco. More recently, the California Teachers Fund divested from firearms. If CalPERS won't divest from Russia, the California legislature can force it to do so, as it did in the case of companies doing business with Iran and Sudan. Former educators, police officers, firefighters, municipal workers, and state employees should let it be known that their retirement dollars can't be used to bankroll a regime that continues to sow division and unrest in America. I agree. And every one of you goddamn investment managers that's playing your little global fucking football using biological warfare needs to shut down your operations where you're using local municipal pension systems to launder your dirty, toxic assets and try to fucking use our children as human shields. Every fucking one of you is a goddamn fucking traitor, regardless of the country you come from. You're a waste of fucking oxygen. You need to shut the fuck down.